I feel the need to explain something here. When we say the phrase coloureds, this refers to a group of people in South Africa called the Cape Coloureds. It's a mixed group of people, so it's not a reference to black people before Americans lose their mind. Like Trevor Noah, for example. Trevor is coloured. If you went to South Africa and you tried to make the case Trevor is black, those people would laugh at you. They'd say, look at this ridiculous man saying Trevor is black. You can see Trevor is not black, he's coloured. That's what they would say to you. So this post, white people will be the first target. South Africa's Julius Malema warns of impending violence because the poor are getting poorer. Yes, because even though the ANC has been in power since the bloody 90s, going on nearly 3 decades, white people do not have any political power in any capacity. Clearly the problem is the white people. You race-baiting daft git. The South African opposition figure has warned of impending civil unrest in the continent's richest country and likened it to an Arab Spring. The DA is the opposition, by the way. The EFF are a fringe bunch of fucking idiots. The controversial opposition leader, Julius Malema, spoke of the country waking up one day with very angry people that are not going to be reasonable, which coincidentally also describes his entire party. Discontent with the ruling African National Congress, the ANC party in South Africa, is at all-time high levels due to the social conditions within the country and the poor becoming poorer. When the unled revolution comes, which I'm sure people like you won't use for your own fucking gain, the first target is going to be white people, Mr. Malema told the BBC's Hard Talk program, adding that the uprising would also target black elites. The only way to head off the violence was an immediate intervention to raise the quality of living for poor people in the country, according to Malema. Yes, just not through capitalism or any kind of self-improvement mechanism that would actually alleviate the poverty in the country. The violence that is going to happen in South Africa is because the elite is disappearing and the poor are becoming more poorer, he said. Therefore, there is going to be something that looks like an Arab Spring. That we are guaranteed. But Malema, who had been accused of fomenting racial tensions, geez, I can't fucking imagine why, denied that it was his own rhetoric that was driving the anger and unrest, calling what had been seen so far a picnic. I've engaged in democratic ways of trying to resolve problems in South Africa. Yes, by singing Kill the Boer, that's very democratic. Those who are scared of our ideas try to create an impression of very violent people. We are not. Your Marxist-Leninists, the foundation of your political ideology, has resulted in the death and oppression of millions. Your reputation as a violent people is very much warranted. We are not responsible for any single violent activity that has happened in South Africa. No, of course not. Malema is a divisive and controversial figure in South African politics, often accused of fomenting racial tensions. But he was only echoing the words of former South African President Thabo Mbeki, who has issued similar warnings last week. One of my fears is that one of these days we're going to have our own version of the Arab Spring, said Mbeki. He said there was no national plan to address the poverty, unemployment, and inequality plaguing South Africa, and warning that it could lead to violence. And did you do anything when you were in power, Mbeki? No, you didn't do a fucking thing. Unemployment in South Africa is rife. Inflation is at a 13-year high, corruption is perceived to be rampant, and the energy sector is troubled. Protesters have demanded the immediate suspension of South African and ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, the reduction of the fuel price, immediate end to load shedding, planned electricity blackouts, interruptions and implementation of the living wage, and a 12% increase in salary for all public servants. It is amazing to me that these people think the government can do all of that just with a flick of the wrist. The current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has acknowledged a difficult time for the country, but in a separate speech said the ANC had a plan to fix things. But it is questionable whether his words will have any credibility. They haven't done anything in 30 bloody years except destroy the country, so somehow I doubt it. With the 30 million South Africans, 55% of the country who live below the poverty line, according to the World Bank. Malema, 41, has been a controversial figure in South African politics, having been convicted of hate speech in 2010 and 2011 for singing the song Shoot the Boer, which critics claim celebrates violence against white people. Prior to 2012, he was a member of the ANC and on the inside of South African politics until his expulsion for hate speech convictions and fomenting racial tensions. So not accused of racial tensions, but it was the reason he was expelled from the ANC. For fuck's sakes. In 2013, he founded the extremely far-left, violent Economic Freedom Fighters, because I'm not going to bullshit people with this crap, which has been accused of fomenting anti-white and anti-Indian racial discord. In 2019, the EFF won nearly 11% of the vote and has 44 seats in Parliament. He was also charged with fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and tax evasion over his handling of government contracts, which surprises fucking no one. The case was dismissed in 2015, and Malema called them politically motivated. Naturally, this being a bit of a contentious issue, there are some things that I can't say. Fortunately, I know someone who can.
Black men, before the white man ever got to Africa, The worst thing that could ever happen to South Africa was when they gave it to Nelson Mandela and black folk. That was a great nation. Now, notwithstanding apartheid was wrong, we all know it's wrong. I'm against it. There should have been some other resolution, though, than turning it over to Nelson Mandela. Disease, AIDS, and crime is running wild in Johannesburg. They're killing one another over there. They're dying of sickness. The government is mismanaged. The people who ran the nation are now leaving the nation because black folk don't know how to run no nation.
Now, being a white South African, I'm going to be biased. Again, however, being a white South African, my bias, nay, my allegiance, is towards the observations of the nature of humans in power and, of course, common fucking sense. This is why I became an absolute monarchist, because the universal suffrage form of democracy destroyed my country. It turns out restricting voting to only the upper educated echelons of society tends to produce better government. Giving the right to vote to people who don't know the first fucking thing about government, who then vote along racial lines, produces catastrophically bad government. Who'd have fucking thought? Stop me if I'm making too much sense here. Because what happened in South Africa in the early 90s with the election of Nelson Mandela was essentially a democratic revolution. And like all revolutions, they deteriorate into a cesspool of corruption, and South Africa was no exception. As a matter of fact, you can hold it up as a prime example of why democracy is an utter failure and lacks the universalist application principle so heralded by every gimp who worships it as the form of government that will bring about a much vaunted peaceful harmony. The attitude of the blacks who voted for the ANC did so for no reason other than Mandela was black, under the guise that he would understand their plight. It was nothing but an emotional victory. Competent governance for South Africa went out the fucking window. They didn't care about government corruption as long as it wasn't the whites in charge. The problem with this is, of course, as anyone with sense could observe, the new government would become a new class of elites, which will create a new style of tension over the years to come because, big shocker, people are more divided by class than race. Couple this with festering racial tensions and an 80% black majority voting base, the ANC essentially has carte blanche to loot the country dry and stuff their own pockets. And because it's a democratic country with elections, when this rope finally snaps, if it ever does, the person in power is the one that will catch the flak, and all the previous ones will be absolved of all their sins. Giving people freedom, whatever form that takes in the Western world, often has catastrophically bad consequences. This concept is an anathema to a Westerner and a mind-blowingly evil thing to utter. Oh, but we have freedom and democracy. This is the uncomfortable reality that hits the libertarian types. The government that governs least only works if the people are not stupid and have a moral backbone. Giving the vast majority of people freedom to indulge in every ill known to man and damage the successful minority that prior ensured a functioning civilization ends up destroying and causing turmoil. What good is the so-called freedom to vote when all of your options are lackluster incompetence and corruption that's worse than the regime you tried to purge? And this is what we have now. Crime has skyrocketed since the ANC took power. AIDS is rampant. The currency value has plummeted. Unemployment is through the roof. The damn power grid is failing and the infrastructure is hanging on by a thread. It is the only country I know of that requires affirmative action to get the majority employed. This is the level of sheer incompetence of South Africa's government. And this idiot, who's worth millions of dollars, by the way, pretty healthy chunk of change for a Marxist-Leninist now, isn't it? And being a Marxist-Leninist, as we could see, he has as much of a history of fomenting violence coupled with as much corruption charges as the regime he's supposedly opposing. Funny that his party was founded in 2013, roughly 2 decades after the ANC took power and has been in power ever since the damn 90s. He is still blaming the whites, singing "shoot the boer," which means kill the farm. Again, he wants to nationalize everything. Does he have the competence to run any industry? No. It'll be the Soviet Union with an even stupider people. Mugabe tried this crap, and purging the white farmers in a series of land reforms in a country whose economy is about 76% dependent on agriculture totally destroyed the economy, and Mugabe naturally gave land to his cronies. I remember reading an entry from a journalist years ago who went to visit Zimbabwe after all of this stuff kicked off, and when speaking to the locals, were stunned that many wanted the whites to come back. And the locals simply said the whites were the ones who managed the farms, so many when they left lost their livelihoods. When they were around, there was stability, there was order, you could buy food, there wasn't hyperinflation, and now the country was in complete ruins. As a matter of fact, a lot of the white farmers went to Zambia and South Africa and ended up exporting food to Zimbabwe. This for a country that was called Africa's breadbasket, that has to import food grown by the very farmers it expelled from the country with their stupid land reforms. And the same power-hungry dipshits now want to further destroy my homeland with the same fucking policies. This is why the label of racism to a South African means nothing. Because if you grew up in an era where your people held the power and you had none of the problems the country is facing right now, and you were told if these people were to ever get any power, they will destroy everything our people built, and that train keeps moving for more than 30 years, you are not going to convince them they're wrong, because reality tells them they are correct. Everything they've been told has come to fruition, especially when you have a party that openly chants, kill the Boer. It's a tough sell to call them racist when the people they're supposedly racist against are openly calling for their death. And shocker, there are older coloreds and blacks who would prefer white rule again in South Africa, which makes people very uncomfortable. But I'm not surprised. I don't have emotional attachment to that kind of sentiment. I understand my countrymen. Much like those Zimbabweans, they've moved past the racial issue. They don't care. They're not stupid. They can see the disastrous maneuvers that Mugabe did and where that leads. They can see the current state of the country and see the problems is not the whites. It's the current government. And when the ANC were not the ones in power, the country was a better place. They simply want competent government. Good luck raising that issue, though. That is all for today, and I will see you all next time.